Ignite. Innovative Impulse für die Verlagsbranche.
Herzlich willkommen zu Folge 11 von Ignite Publishing, dem Podcast, der sich mit den Innovationen im Publishing beschäftigt. Mein Name ist Daniel Lenz, Journalist aus Köln. Heute an meiner Seite wieder
Albrecht Mangler. Und Daniel, ich habe eine wahnsinnige Neuigkeit für dich.
Bin sehr gespannt.
Bald ist Buchmesse. Total gut. Weißt du schon, was dich dort erwartet? Sag nein.
Gut, dass du mich dran erinnerst. Das hätte ich jetzt fast vergessen heute am 11. September, wenn wir die Folge ja aufnehmen. Natürlich weiß ich, was mich auf der Buchmesse erwartet. Wir haben tatsächlich auf der Buchmesse das ein oder andere Event an der Stelle. Gut, dass du mich fragst, Albrecht. Wir verleihen zum Beispiel den Digital Publishing Award am Messe-Mittwoch nachmittags um 15 Uhr auf der International Stage. Und das ist sicherlich das größte Event, was wir vorhaben. Was plant ihr denn so?
Ja, also besonders schön, worauf du dich freuen kannst, ist unser Zebralution Magazin. Den Titel mag ich noch nicht verraten, nur so viel: Zebras werden darin vorkommen, auf die eine oder andere Art. Das ist sowohl digital verfügbar, als auch, wer schnell und freundlich genug ist, am Zebralution Stand in Halle 3.1. Und es wird super, es ist nämlich auch ein Artikel von mir drin, über die Kunst im Internet gefunden zu werden, mit dem Einsatz von KI oder ohne Einsatz, also wahnsinnig spannend. Natürlich bei der Awardverleihung am besten nicht lesen, weil es ja super spannend dann, wer die Preise gewinnt. Ich frage dich mal nicht nach deinen Favoriten.
Nee, das darfst du mich auch gar nicht fragen. Die habe ich tatsächlich.
Ich weiß.
Da ich auch nicht selbst zur Jury gehöre, bin ich da tatsächlich außen vor. Bin selbst sehr gespannt. Tatsächlich, die Entscheidung der Jury steht noch aus. Also ich weiß es auch noch gar nicht, wer die Preise gewinnt. Aber so oder so wird es spannend. Wir haben über 70 Bewerbungen. Der Preis wird ja zum ersten Mal international vergeben dieses Jahr. Und da sind wirklich fantastische Bewerbungen dabei. Du hast gerade schon das Thema KI angesprochen. Das wird sicherlich in diesem Magazin ein Schwerpunktthema sein, oder?
Ja, vor allem geht es um Sichtbarkeit. Das ist ja ein wichtiges Thema, würde ich sagen, oder würde ich nicht nur sagen, sondern sage ich auch tatsächlich. Es gibt sehr viele Neuerscheinungen und im Vergleich zu, sagen wir mal, den 80ern, wo es wichtig war, im Stapel in der Buchhandlung zu liegen, in Klammer, das war jetzt verkürzt dargestellt, ist es jetzt ja wichtig, überhaupt sichtbar zu sein. Und die Konkurrenz ist riesig. Also ich rede jetzt hier gar nicht von den Streaming-Anbietern für Video oder Audio, sondern einfach sichtbar zu sein mit dem eigenen Themen, also da eine relevante Reichweite in der Zielgruppe auch zu haben, dann halt auch als relevant wahrgenommen zu werden, dass ich sage, hey, wow, dieser Content, der interessiert mich. Und ja, dass ich dann halt auch weiß, wo bekomme ich denn den? Also allein, glaube ich, im Audiobook-Bereich habe ich die Übersicht fast schon verloren über die verschiedenen Streaming-Anbieter. Und ja, gibt auch viele Online-Buchhandlungen und Sortimentsbuchhandlungen natürlich auch. Also genau, darum wird es vor allem gehen, wie wird man gefunden und natürlich auch, wie helfen wir als Zebralution dabei, dass ich hier einen guten Aufschlag habe.
Discoverability ist ja das Stichwort. Da hat man tatsächlich ja schon vor 10 Jahren drüber gesprochen. Wie hat sich denn dieses Game durch KI jetzt nochmal verändert?
Schön, dass du fragst, Daniel. Das ist eine Antwort, da kann ich jetzt ganz, ganz lange reden. Ich würde es trotzdem jetzt mal ganz kurz halten. Es gibt natürlich mehr und mehr KI-getriebene Suchen. Sei es halt irgendwie, indem ich Sprachmodelle anwende, um Inhalte zu generieren oder halt auch Inhalte zu veredeln. Da kann ich natürlich da auch eine gewisse Sichtbarkeit haben, aber ich glaube auch, das Spannende ist überhaupt AI-Suchmaschinen wie Perplexity oder auch bei ChatGPT, wo ich eine ganz andere Art von Sichtbarkeit habe. Also zum Beispiel, stelle mir die 3 besten Krimis zusammen mit einem irgendwie klassischen Denouement am Ende und erstelle mir eine Liste und sag dem Agenten, er soll sie mir in der Buchhandlung meiner Wahl kaufen. Also solche Sachen habe ich auch schon getestet und das ist natürlich auch total gut. Ne? Da fängt's an und das würde ich sagen, hört dann auf, dass ich meinen Online-Shop für KI-Agenten optimiere, sodass in Zukunft Albrechts Thriller-Such-Bot dann halt auch entspannt einkaufen kann, weil ich habe beobachtet, dass der Agent auch wirklich genauso wie ich unter zu vielen Pop-up-Fenstern leidet und sie alle, ja, wegklicken ist vielleicht nicht das richtige Wort, aber irgendwie schließen muss.
Das ist, glaube ich, so ein Post-Boomer-Phänomen, ne? Zu viele Tabs offen zu haben. Aber das ist ein anderes Thema. Wir bleiben in dieser Folge ja beim Thema KI und Publishing. Wir begrüßen gleich Natalie Helberger, Professor Natalie Helberger, die ich tatsächlich letztes Jahr kennengelernt habe auf einer Konferenz in den Niederlanden. Und zwar von einem Dienstleister ausgerichtet. Tribe heißt der Dienstleister, der baut quasi E-Paper-Angebote und News-Webseiten-Angebote für große Presseverlage international. Und auf dieser Konferenz hat Natalie einen Vortrag gehalten und sie hat ihr Szenario vorgestellt von der FutureNewsCorp. Sie hat sich also sozusagen die KI-Entwicklung heute angeschaut und hat dann extrapoliert, wie sich diese Entwicklung bis zum Jahr 2043 entwickeln könnte. Und da ist eine Dystopie daraus entstanden. Die FutureNewsCorp ist nämlich eine Firma, die letztlich von KI-Firmen betrieben wird. Ein riesengroßes Unternehmen, über 20.000 Mitarbeiterinnen und Mitarbeiter, Datenwissenschaftler, Entwickler, UX-Designer, auch Journalisten, allerdings eben im Auftrag von dieser KI-Firma. Und in diesem Szenario gibt es eigentlich die klassischen Verlage nicht mehr, wie es sie heute gibt. Sie sind nämlich degradiert worden zu reinen Zulieferern, zu Beiträgern zu diesem FutureNewsCorp. Und dieses FutureNewsCorp, also diese KI-Firma, verarbeitet lediglich die Inhalte, die dann die klassischen Verlage anliefern. Das ist sicherlich kein angenehmes Szenario. Und wir haben uns mit Natalie darüber unterhalten, wie dieses Szenario entstanden ist, aber auch was die Verlage heutzutage tun können, um dieses Szenario noch abzuwenden. Bevor es aber losgeht, hören wir eine neue Folge des Data Docs mit Vero. Vero, was hast du uns heute mitgebracht?
In unserer letzten Kolumne haben wir Sichtbarkeit am Beispiel von Lismio besprochen. Sichtbarkeit soll ja Aufmerksamkeit bei Lesern und Hörern erzeugen. Daher widmen wir uns heute in unserer Kolumne genau diesem Thema: Aufmerksamkeit. Die heutige Zahl zu diesem Thema zeigt, dass sich die Aufmerksamkeitsspanne des Menschen verändert. Zum Beispiel die am Bildschirm. Die durchschnittliche Aufmerksamkeitsspanne am Bildschirm hat sich nämlich laut einer Untersuchung der University of California, Irvine zwischen den Jahren 2004 und 2023 erheblich verkürzt. Konnte ein Nutzer im Jahr 2004 sich durchschnittlich noch 2,5 Minuten bzw. 150 Sekunden lang einer Aufgabe widmen, so ist genau dieser Wert bis zum Jahr 2023 auf 47 Sekunden gesunken, bevor die Aufmerksamkeit durch eine andere Sache unterbrochen wird. Schon 1971 erkannte dazu der Nobelpreisträger Herbert A. Simon folgendes Problem: A wealth of information creates a poverty of attention. Heißt, ein Überfluss an Information führt zu einem Mangel an Aufmerksamkeit. Und genau damit haben wir es ja heute zu tun. Einem Überfluss an Informationen, allein schon am Bildschirm. 47 Sekunden sind ja nicht wirklich viel. Deshalb habe ich mal spaßeshalber gecheckt, was ich so in 47 Sekunden schaffe. Was dabei rauskam? Nun ja, ich habe in 47 Sekunden 2 kurze Absätze eines Textes gelesen. Dann habe ich in 47 Sekunden 12 Maschen gehäkelt und zu guter Letzt habe ich in 47 Sekunden genau 3 kurze LinkedIn-Posts gelesen. Nun mag meine Lesegeschwindigkeit vielleicht langsamer, vielleicht aber auch schneller als die des Durchschnitts sein. Das müssen wir an dieser Stelle leider offen lassen. Aber was bedeutet das denn nun grundsätzlich für uns, wenn wir Aufmerksamkeit auf unsere Inhalte lenken wollen? Nun ja, dann benötigen wir kurze und prägnante Botschaften. Heißt, wir müssen kurz und verständlich formulieren, um unsere Botschaften in dieser kurzen Aufmerksamkeitsspanne am Bildschirm an die Rezipienten unterzubringen. Hier helfen auch visuelle Mittel wie Bilder und Videos, die Aufmerksamkeit auf unsere Inhalte zu lenken und im besten Fall auch dort zu halten. Ein Medium, das das in Perfektion beherrscht, ist uns allen bekannt: TikTok. Hier werden Geschichten und Botschaften in sogenannten Microclips verpackt, die die maximale Aufmerksamkeit erzeugen. Und gerade hier wurde für das Medienbuch ein neuer Platz mit BookTok geschaffen, der es endlich wieder ins Rampenlicht rückt. Ein Genre, das darüber sehr groß geworden ist New and Young Adult. Und genau damit wollen wir uns in unserer nächsten Kolumne beschäftigen. Was bleibt denn als Resümee der heutigen Zahl? Das ist wohl: Aufmerksamkeit ist die knappste und wertvollste Währung zugleich. Und die müssen wir unseren Büchern verschaffen. Diese Aufgabe ist alles andere als leicht zu bewerkstelligen, denn Verlage konkurrieren ja, und das wissen wir alle, heute nicht mehr nur mit anderen Verlagen um die Aufmerksamkeit der Leser, sondern mit Instagram, Netflix, TikTok und Co. In diesem Sinne, lassen Sie uns aufmerksam bleiben.
Welcome, Natalie.
Hello.
So we read your FutureNewsCorp scenario, and in this scenario you describe a dramatic dependency of media companies on a few tech giants, which is leading to a kind of a Netflix of AI in the year of 2043. How did you develop this scientific scenario?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So essentially I looked at two developments that I'm quite involved with and that I observe, and where I saw that they run in parallel and reinforce themselves. So on the one hand, how technology is more and more important in the news business, and how media organizations are adopting really their ways of working towards using new technologies like AI and Gen AI. And on the other hand, the whole discussion around the making of the AI Act and the European legal response to AI. And what you can see there is that the law on the one hand tries to make AI technology safer, but it also gives considerable epistemic power to technology companies to define what is good and responsible tech. And actually reinforcing their position and increasing the legal burdens for users of technology.
Mm-hmm.
Like media organizations.
All right, I see. But I assume that there are even today, concrete warning signs you see regarding the, German or European publishing landscape. Where do you see especially these warning signs?
Yeah. In the media sector, quite understandably, there is now quite some of discussion of how much of the technology should we develop in-house and how much do we need to procure. And I think it's good to keep in the back of your mind that media organizations are generally tech companies. So they're depending on external companies is not per se problematic. But what we see is that there's enormous concentration around a handful of US technology companies that supply most of the AI technology that is being used by media organizations, especially OpenAI and Anthropic and Google. So there is a very little active choice and therefore growing dependencies on these companies and little experimentation with alternative AI solutions, for example, by smaller more specialized developers. And this is a trend that I find concerning because it only results in dependencies and increasing power for these large technologies that use media content, but it also curbs demand for alternative, more specialized solutions that could potentially serve media organizations and publishers. And I think especially this later aspect is also very disconcerting.
Yeah. So it's all about the dominance of these AI companies primarily. The AI companies themselves, they would justify their methods, hinting at the progress and at the innovation. They say that their training models would be essential for technological progress, for the development of applications that benefit society in the end. What would you say to these arguments?
They definitely have a role in driving progress and innovation. And because they combine technology expertise with these incredible amounts of data they use more or less lawfully, they do have a cutting edge in developing this technology. That does not mean that there is any reason why they should be the only ones developing good and useful and responsible technology solutions. So I think this narrative of we really need large technology companies to use technology, I think that's a screwed discussion. But you see it reflected more and more also in legal proceedings. So, for example, just I think Tuesday there was a settlement between Anthropic and a couple of US publishers, where the court essentially said yes. So the training of these models on the content of book club publishers, that is fair news. because companies create something new. The only problem that the judge flagged, and that I found really interesting, is that Anthropic failed to pay for the books, but got the books from pirate libraries. So, which essentially would mean as long as Anthropic buys all these books and then trains the models that later compete with publishers, everything is okay. And I think that is a very naive reading of what is happening right now.
So just this hints me to the question of copyright as we are discussing fair use right now. Would you say that the business model of publishing houses, or most publishing houses built on copyright, is ending? Also, business models based on copyright maybe also in your scenario come to an end, or are really in danger of being terminated?
Well, maybe not that dramatic, but what we do see is that the existing text and data mining exceptions in European copyright, for example, are only partly a solution, because all these publishers who have not excluded the training, the damage is done. So the models have already been trained on their content. So copyright at the moment does not help them a lot. The real challenge is in developing collective licensing solutions. So publishers joining forces together to negotiate together more favorable deals. Because what we also see is that some of these technology companies, like OpenAI, I'm observing that for the media sector, are adopting this conquer and divide strategies, where they reach out to a couple of large publishers and negotiating individual deals with them. That is disadvantageous for smaller publishers, and it also prevents collective solutions and increasing negotiation power, which is why, for example, find it in the Netherlands quite interesting that here the media publishers have decided to bargain collectively with OpenAI and likes to improve their negotiation position. So copyright is one thing, but how you exercise and realize your rights and negotiate them is the other. And I think the real challenge is also really in the imbalances of negotiation power right now. And then part of the problem is training the models on existing content, but then there is the other challenge, and that's particularly pertinent for the news industry, which is not only the training of the models, but using real life information to feed things like Perplexity or Google AI overviews. So I think we also need to make a distinction between training past content and using very recent content, especially with news organizations, to power chatbots that then subsequently can compete with news media organizations and presenting users cutting-edge news.
Yeah. So speaking of news organizations and book publishers and copyright, and also what I think is very interesting for creating content in the future, as far as I know, that content is not protected by copyright in the future. So as an author, if I write a book using AI, will this book be protected by copyright respectively? So having thought of that, what would you say, who needs to be more concerned about the future, the news organizations with in contrary to the powerful chatbots you mentioned, or the book publishers, meaning the authors don't have a copyright to sell anymore? In brackets, this was, of course, exaggerated.
Yes, yeah, I do not see immediate signs of abolishing copyright. So, and looking at the policy discussions at the European level, I don't think that this will come anytime soon. The problem is really in the enforcement of these rights and finding workable solutions of collective licensing and also distributing income to authors. That is the one thing. A problem that copyright law is not so prepared to deal with is what happens if these are super, super powerful, well-trained models that, as you say, generate entertaining, great stories that compete with traditional publishers. So this is a question I don't think that copyright law is particularly well prepared for dealing with. And therefore, I think I would like to see some more strategic reflection about what to do with the content. So we see in the news publishing industry that more and more media organizations are concluding these exclusive deals with Perplexity, OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, so that these large models can use their content for training. But why not think about using the content to help the development of alternative, smaller models, open source models that then media organizations and book publishers could use? For example, to develop their own chatbots, but also make sure that they're developed on lawful content. So an example of that we again see in the Netherlands, where the Dutch government together with TNO is investing in GPTNL, a Dutch language model. And where just recently all the publishers decided to work together with GPTNL and provide a lot of their content for training the model. And in exchange, the publishers will get income from the subscriptions from GPTNL and will also be able to use this model, which then will be specifically trained on Dutch language content. So I think these solutions, it's not a black and white choice, either sue them or license with them. I think there are also other options, for example, using the contents to stimulate alternative developments and solutions. And I think this middle way should be explored much more often.
But this seems to me the most ambitious alternative way to create an own LLM model, right?
Of course it is challenging, but then again, do we want to have alternatives to being dependent on a handful of very large models? Yes. So how do we get there? For example, by joining forces. And I think something that we see a lot in this discussion is that the next model needs to be as large and big as Claude or GPT. But for many tasks, we don't even need super high-powered models. Maybe more specialized models trained on high-quality content can be much more suitable for certain tasks. So I think there's this whole narrative of scope and scalability, and that good solutions need to be the hugest, biggest, fastest. And I think we should be more careful with this narrative and then question whether this is really true for the task at hand. For example, I think take translation. By now GPT is quite okay in translating, for example, from English to German. But imagine a model that has been really trained on German content. Isn't it likelihood more that the translations will be even better?
Definitely. But if you create a new model, I think from the perspective of the users, this has to compete with the big models. I don't think that the consumers say, for me, it's okay to have a limited model which only can deal with singular tasks. And that is very hard in the end to compete with the big models, because you can never collect this amount of money to develop these models.
Because you said the publishers could profit from or benefit from the subscriptions. If I think of a thriller model, for example, where I, as a thriller fan, can subscribe and then I can generate as many bloody thrillers as I wanted, or I can have my detective stories and it's really specialized content. Okay, that is also possible maybe.
Mm-hmm. I think there are a lot of really cool potential solutions of completely reimagining how we deal with content and the relationship with the users. But I think it's also important to make a distinction between consumer-facing models and models that publishers, for example, use to produce their own content or new innovative ways of engaging with the audience. And there, my argument would be maybe more specialized models trained on really high quality content are even more useful than something like GPTL that is famously unstable, full of biased content, unlawful content, and so far. So from a publisher perspective, maybe a smaller but lawful and high quality model is even more useful.
Yeah. We just had the example here in our podcast where we tried to do a transcript of one of our conversations with a US publisher. And we used GPT-5, and it should be a very transcript which is very close to the audio. and it was completely invented. I read the transcript. I did not recognize any thread of discussion in this text. It was weird.
Yeah, and at the moment, what we also something that we also don't talk a lot about, if we see that the leading models right now are US-based models, and if we see the strong movement in the US to cut down on all research into non-discrimination, fairness, and inclusiveness, and making, which actually there will. I mean, a lot of research projects have been stopped, and part of this research also, of course, informs the way these models are made and risk tests and so far. So I think looking a bit forward, I really wonder how safe some of these will still be if there are no good security research around them, or people who have any idea about how to test for discrimination or harmful content. So yeah, I think this is also a discussion I would like to see more, how the trend now in the US to cut down on research and really have this strong propaganda against certain topics will affect ultimately the usability of these models here in Europe.
That's also, I'm still thinking about my thriller bot. That's quite exciting. Daniel, because we discussed this question before, so would you say that in speaking of this kind of story bot or B2B like publisher helping bot, would you say that as part of concrete steps to escape the FutureNewsCorp scenario, you would suggest that publishers become partly tech companies? So instead of editorial team, I need my LLM language training team or my AI tech specialists in combination with my editorial team.
That is a really good question. First of all, I don't think it's feasible for all publishers to become tech companies, right? Because let's be honest, this is very, very important and not the core business of most publishers, especially smaller publishers. For some of them, it might be an interesting solution to develop, and we see that they develop certain technologies in-house. I think what is more important, it's not per se a problem to procure with external companies, as long as there's a decent, fair negotiation power, and you can make sure that the company that you have is sufficient negotiation power to make the companies respect your professional values and provide new services at your terms and not at their terms. And I think these imbalances in negotiation power is partly what the problem right now is, and that ultimately you would like technologies companies that help you build better products for your audiences instead of using your content to build better products for their audience, right? And I think that is important. So I really like your murderbot idea. But then who should develop that? Should Perplexity or Google develop that, or should a publisher develop that? And I think that is the core question. And then are there sufficient companies they can use to help them in doing that rather than taking over? So yeah, what we see, especially in media organizations, if you look at for job advertisement and also the structure of personnel in media organizations, that there are more and more tech-savvy people in there. And I think that is a good development, right? As long as it's in balance with people who understand content and editorial, and we see real collaboration there. So, but it doesn't mean that you per se have to develop all the tech internally, as long as you have good, trusted and reliable and fair partners that respect what you do.
So partner up for negotiation power and think about tools using AI to support your business model then?
And help maybe develop a richer ecosystem of tech companies that can help you developing these. So again, nobody says that. I mean, I definitely think that OpenAI and Google and Microsoft, they develop really cool technology, right? I mean, they have the means to do so, but I don't think that this is they are the only ones who can develop cool tech. And I think the publishers should realize that they also have considerable power to stimulate demand for alternative and for their purpose better solutions, and be more conscious that and use that power to procure, for example, with startups, specialized startups and smaller and open source companies.
Which would also mean that the publishers would invest in their staff so they get a better AI literacy, so they understand what AI can do and what is possible with AI for their own like stories, business books, authors, and so on and so on.
Yeah, and that also, it's not only at the level of the people working with it, but also management, of course, needs to understand what is possible and what is not possible, and not to buy in empty efficiency promises, but really have an idea what kind of problem do I really want to see solved and what technology do I need for this.
Yeah. I don't know if you have other insights, but recently we did a survey among German publishers, especially book publishers, and they are not prepared to invest in AI literacy for their staff right now. So they invest in, I don't know, AI technology perhaps, in licensing deals, but very few only invest in training of their staff, and that is a problem, I think, too.
Yes, I agree with you that this is a problem. I mean, if we really want to use this technology for good and know where it can help us, we need to understand it. That doesn't mean that everyone on the team has to be able to program, but there should be a common understanding of what the tech could do and where are the experts that you need to engage with to come out to new solutions. Because, I mean, at the moment, what is going on out there is an enormous battle for the audience, right? And publishers compete with, because they both develop audience-facing solutions. So, yeah, if you do not invest in knowledge and in talent and in creating new attractive consumer-facing applications, then the audience will move to those who do it and who have the content to do this. So then Murderbot will be developed by Google instead of take your favorite publisher.
Yeah, the Murderbot, right. I find your Netherlands example very interesting. I hope that there are German publishers who will do the same. Haven't read about something like that. But here in Germany, as far as news or book publishers are concerned, if they want to create something of their own, they use the models of the big companies and establish these kinds of RAG systems, right? So they use their own data and only their own data and set up an infrastructure of the big LLMs upon that data sheet and then offer their models. So they are still dependent on the big tech companies, but only use their own data.
Yes, which is, of course, a way. The disadvantage is that they will not build up the necessary expertise and technologies themselves. So in the end, they will face a long-term dependency on external publishers and external tech companies. And imagine, I mean, we've seen that with the news industry also. I think the whole discussion about the relationship of the news industry and social media platforms is very instructive, because in the beginning, there was a lot of interaction and platforms have been wooing the news industry because they needed the content, right? And more recently, we see that Google, Facebook are moving off the news because news content is not profitable anymore and they can create their own content now. So, so these are not necessarily lasting love relationships. And I think it's really good to be aware of this, where the economic incentives are for the different parties and they're not aligned.
Yeah, this is something I fear as well, that once the big tech companies have the contents of the publishers, they move on, especially the book publishers. If they have their licensing deal, they can train their models with the content. Then the content is already embedded in their models. And then, they do not need to cooperate with the news publisher.
No. Insofar, there's maybe a difference with also the news industry, because in news industry, the most recent news, of course, is important. And we see in some of the deals that these deals do not include the content from the past 6 months to make sure that Perplexity is not competing with news websites, which is probably something that for news publishers is more difficult to achieve. And then you can, of course, argue if there's not new creative content at some point, these models will not develop furthermore interesting. Yeah, so that could be a silver lining on the horizon. But then how much will the audience care? I mean, if they can create their own murder stories, Yeah,
it's all about the prompt. Yeah.
So it's really, I think I see a lot of short-term thinking at the cost of long-term perspectives. And also a bit of a panic moment. Oh my God, if we do not go and license now, we miss the boat. And so I really would like to see some more considerations if the economic benefits from these deals really outweigh the long-term implications.
If I understand it correctly, if you were a publisher, you would be a little bit reluctant to license your content.
I would definitely be reluctant to enter in bi-directional negotiations with one of the tech companies right now, because there's a very strong likelihood that you will not get a very good deal. I mean, take these agreements, the fact that they are completely intransparent. Part of the reason why they are, because that makes it impossible to compare the deals and see who got a better deal, why, what are the conditions, which is a disadvantage for the publishing industry because it makes it more difficult for them to coordinate. And you will really have this conquer and divide strategy that probably will be to the disadvantage of publishers.
I just wanted to ask if you would say that this negotiation would be a task for the Börsenverein des Deutschen Buchhandels, so to speak, the lobby organization or the organization that is organizing, in which all the publishers and booksellers are organized, which is also represented in every European country, I think. So maybe they could foster this at least or pursue
I think collective deals will increase the likelihood of you getting a good deal, also not for one or two of the really large ones, but also the smaller ones. So because otherwise we will face considerable digital divides here where a couple of publishers manage to get good deals and a lot of small publishers will be left out. And with all possible consequences. But again, I think also some reflections, realize that this content is super valuable because what is now really scarce as next to compute is good training content. So in some respects, publishers are sitting on the trove of gold here because it's really high quality content, right? So I think thinking a bit more strategically how to invest this resource and what to do with it, that would also benefit publishers in the long term. So not only bringing in a couple of millions, but really benefit their business in the long term. I think that would be very reasonable. And investing in, and I'm repeating myself here, but I have the feeling that we can't repeat it often enough, investing in a vibrant competitive market of specialized solutions could in the long term benefit publishers much more than betting all their horses on a couple of US tech companies only.
In your research, you have a proposal to unteach the audience. This is quite interesting, I think. What kind of strategies can publishers develop to win back their readers from these big tech news feeds and build direct relationships?
Yeah, thank you for bringing this up, because I do think that Gen AI here has really created new opportunities and to turn the tide. Over the past decade, we really have educated the audience that if they want to find content, they can go to YouTube, to Instagram, to Meta, to TikTok, and there they find high quality content, right? Because all publishers try to be there because they need to reach the audience. And platforms were then these middlers between publishers and the audience on the terms of the platforms. And so we have also educated the audience to find this content and find it mostly for free because publishers hope to get some of the advertisement income. Generative AI is a really interesting technology in the sense that it really allows new ways of engaging with the audience. For example, by developing chatbots, virtual assistants, by playing around with the way content is presented in different formats, multimodal. So this could be really used to build new attractive services to engage directly with the audience. And then the question is, whom do we want to build these new attractive services? Do we want Perplexity to do that and they're really fully engaged in doing so? Or do we want to use the opportunity to build them themselves? Publishers, news media organizations, just to make it worthwhile again for the audience to go directly to the website of a news publisher. And I think this is a question that publishers really should ask themselves. Whom do they want to build these new fancy technologies? Because right now, big tech, OpenAI, Google, Perplexity, they are trying to find out these new ways of arresting the attention of the audience. So do we want them to again take the audience and be the middler?
Would you say that we need more regulatory approaches to help the publishers or to help the publishing industry? Or would you say the AI Act in itself is a start that is suitable at the moment?
If you look at the AI Act, essentially what it does, it is to try to protect European consumers from irresponsible technologies. So technologies that are not safe, right? What the law is not doing is creating incentives for responsible technology development, like green, open source, considerant of professional values. So where I do see a role for regulation is more incentive-based regulation that tries to make it easier, for example, for publishers, but also smaller technology developers to engage in technology development. Think of tax incentives, think of simplifying rules for companies that show that they really want to develop honest tech for good with participation from the users. Think of competition law. So I think what we really should look into is more incentive-based approaches to incentivize responsible and alternative tech developments. And that I do not see the AI Act doing. So I think we need to think more about these alternatives. And there are, examples from other industries where we have used these incentive schemes. So I think we should try to figure out whether we can create them for the media sector as well.
I was just thinking when you mentioned the specialized AI tools for different tasks that I remembered the 90s where Microsoft was using Microsoft Internet Explorer on every device with Windows 95, and they were sued, and eventually they had to pay for a violation of the law. And now every Office 365 comes with Copilot. So when you mentioned you have these specialized things, maybe this could also mean that you have a choice there, which AI model you would use in your Office integration. So there's not only OpenAI / Microsoft, but also whatsoever tool you maybe need. So this was why. So the background of the question.
Exactly, or interoperability solutions.
So you have developed this scenario for 2043, which is a kind of dystopic scenario, doomsday scenario. In case the publishers all consider your suggestions or our suggestions which we developed today, what could a more positive scenario look like in 20 years? Yeah, great metaphor. Publishers have created their own LLM.
I'm not sure about that. Then we would replace one very large proprietary LLM with another very large proprietary LLM, which is not necessarily the best solution. I think a positive scenario would see a much more vibrant and diverse market for smaller specialized tech startups, which I think for many reasons, competition, consumer law, but also environmental reasons might be the better solution. A positive scenario would also see some more experimentation, and maybe indeed some publishers think what their core expertise is, production of content, and how content could end up with users. So maybe really rethinking the products that we want to offer consumers. So I think the scenario is to some extent a doomsday scenario because there's a huge concentration of power. But you also could think that parts of the scenario are not even that doomsday, because then what the scenario also does is saying, well, the the media organizations producing content and teaming up with tech solutions to bring this content in exciting new formats to the audience. So that part of the scenario can also be positive. I think we're really at a moment where we have the opportunity to rethink also the formats and the relationship with the audience, and being a bit more experimental and blue sky thinking there, I think would be for me part of a positive scenario.
Are you planning to reevaluate or review your scenario in, 5 years?
Actually, I'm quite. I was quite surprised how little sci-fi the scenario already is. I think the developments went so much faster, even, and it's so much closer to this point. But I would love to write another scenario that is a more positive, encouraging one. And I really hope that I will see the developments in both the law and the publishing industry to feed into this.
We're looking forward to reading this alternative, positive scenario, Natalie. Thank you so much for our conversation today.
Thank you.
Thank you.